everybody. Shkoyach for coming. Thank you for coming. Kislev, we continue to learn. Sponsored by the Brenners in memory protection of Tovia Reuven ben Chaya Hadassah, proudly serving in Aza. Miriam and Avram Deutsch in honor of the 30th Aliyah. Mindy Barad, thanks to Hashem for Nisim, past, present, and future for all of Am Yisrael. But this week is sponsored by Tzvi and Yael Katzman in honor of the first year of Tzvi's Abba, Avram Moshe ben Shlomo Katz V'Sil Zichrono Livracha, and that all the Chayalim should complete the task at hand and come home safely. By Zahava Englard and Norman Shapiro, B'schus Banenu, Nechum Ba'aza, Avram Yosef ben Zava Dina, Be'ezer ben Miriam Ilana, שיחזרו יחד עם כל חיילינו בניצחון לשלום, בריאים בגוף ובריאים בנפש. We have a great piece today. Hopefully it's always a good piece. We have just a beautiful gift from Rav Kluger today. Rav Kluger on Chanukah. Can't get to the Nirot faster. Put it like that. If you could pass these around. This is a very, very special piece. I think that we need this more here for minutes. Sometimes with Rav Kluger's Torahs, they're either like so out there and you have to work so hard to get through them, and all these different connections and sirufim, and sometimes he just says something so nagish, so accessible. And today, what we're going to be seeing is that Rav Kluger is going to bring us to look at Chanukah in such a beautiful way, in such a lichora, it seems such a simple way, but I think very much shayach for us today. And especially, I always get very intimidated by the Nirot, because I show up to the candles expecting it to be like, forgetting I have 5 kids, I come with like half of my svarim to the candles. I sit there, with the guitar, and I'm like, write 3 nigunim, learn 15 pieces, and, I meditate on the candles for an hour and a half. It never happens. It happened the last time probably when I was like touring and I was alone in a hotel room, and like that's the last time it happened, like who knows how many years ago. It used to happen. I used to travel a lot on Chanukah dafka. But there are also kavanas that all you got to do is like take like a minute and just remember and go weiter and go forward with it. And this is really that, like just like a minute of just remembering and being open to learning the story of Chanukah again from the beginning. So we'll get right to it. The topic is Chidush HaNitzachon בעצם היציאה למלחמה בימים ההם בזמן הזה. How practical, huh?
When did you write this?
No, a while ago. Not now. They're all words of. They're always thinking about every day till Mashiach comes. Okay. הנה כל הימים טובים והניסים שנעשו לישראל היו באופן שהיו גזירות קשות לעם ישראל, ובחסדי השם יתברך ניצלו מהם. So, most holidays where we celebrate like the miraculous side of things, like the nes of it, right? כל הימים הטובים והניסים, the miracles that were done for Am Yisrael, what's the format of the holidays that are like miracles? It's simple. There were gzerot kashot. There was an evil decree. And then, with Chasdei Hashem, thank God, we were saved by it.
Like and then we eat.
And then we eat, right? That's the format, right? Hanukkah's no different than that one, right? And that's the format, more or less. Kigon, like the greatest example he gives, but we can do this with other chagim as well, especially Pesach. Kigon, Hanes Shea Bepurim, שהגזרה נגזרה עקב כך שחטאו. והירידה במצב של עם ישראל. Like, let's look at Purim on the pshat. What was when you look at the story of Purim, what was taking place? There was a bad, evil decree on us. Yeah, it came through the pawn, the puppet called Haman. How did it result? Like, what brought about it? So we all know the reason why the Megillah opens up with the story about the Suda v'Chashverosh shows us where we were at, right? There was a Yerida. There was a Yerida in Am Yisrael. It was kind of like we were tanking, right? We were tanking. And then there was a gzera on Am Yisrael. Hayta gzera kasha begashmiut uveruchniut, Rav Kluger says in the third line. There was a gzera kasha both physically and spiritually. Right? There was a gzera to, when you say you're going to be wiped out, that also means your spirit's going to be wiped out as well. Ve'az, and then we know the end of the story, and we say it every Motzei Shabbos. LaYudim hayta ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. And then the story flips over, and it's amazing how some people forget, like in their own lives, they live in Megillas Esther, but they forget that there are chapters that come after Perek Dalet and Gimel Dalet and Hey, right? But that's really what the story of Purim was. There was a Gzera Kasha, things were really bad, and then LaYudim hayta ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. That's the format of a lot of miracles. We went off a bad Gzera, and then it flipped over, and then Mazel Tov, and then there's a Yantiv. That's not the story of Chanukah. Even though you're saying, what do you mean that's not the story of Chanukah? That seems exactly the story of Chanukah. He says, we have to relearn the story of Chanukah. Because what happened on Chanukah, and this next line is the tamtzit. How do you say tamtzit? Yeah, that's a good for this. It's the essence of this teaching. Bo nishtana etzem hatzura shel klal Yisrael. Chanukah is dealing with something else, because it wasn't necessarily about a decree against Jews that put us in danger, but something else was going on with us. Etzem hatzura, the essence of our tzura. Now, tzura literally in Hebrew means like shape or form, right? The shape, the form of what it meant to be a Jew was changing. And that, to a certain extent, is a much more dangerous situation than when you have a decree on you that you're going to get killed. Because then the whole, cause and effect, the whole miracle and non-miracle, then that whole miracle, that's how it works, the miracle format. But here we're talking about, Rav Kluger says, etzem hatzura, the shape of a Jew, the form of a Jew. And we're going to discuss what that means exactly. This was what was going on. And that's why the miracle of Chanukah, the story of Chanukah is different, but how are we going to get to a place of understanding how it's so, let's figure out how are we going to understand how it's so different. Bo nishtana etzem hatzura shel klal Yisrael. The klal Yisrael as a klal started to look very, very different. Now, this is important. When he says over here that Am Yisrael, the tzura, started to look different, I just want to make it clear, we're not only speaking about that people started dressing modern, right? That's not the inyan of that the tzura of Am Yisrael started looking different. Clearly, you and I we're not necessarily dressing the way that, Yidden dressed hundreds of years ago. So what about us? We're also nishtane etzem hatzura. We're not talking about these kind of things. We're talking about something much deeper that was changing, and that's what we have to discuss in order to understand and take in the depths of what this miracle of Chanukah is all about. Okay, next line. This is again very mamash pashut lashon today. Very pashut lashon. Very simple language. Adina, do you want one? Does anyone need more? Are there more needed? Oh, there are. Okay. הנה בדרך כלל, second paragraph, הנה בדרך כלל מכירים את המעשה של חנוכה מימי הילדות. Come on. We know it's one of the stories that the Chanukah and Purim we know better probably than any other story. Maybe Yetzias Mitzrayim, a little bit of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but Chanukah is something since we're kids. We know the story. We know it since we're kids.
We know that story though.
So this is where he's going. ולפעמים לא מתבונן בכל שנה בעומק המעשה של הנס. You see what happens to us? When we know the story, the way that we remember it since we're kids, so we generally just know the story, and every year we try to find good words on it. But it doesn't cause us to look deeper and learn more about the story. Like if I asked you right now, what's the story of Chanukah? So we would probably be able to say, and I would ask you on Pshat, what was the story of Chanukah? So we'd probably say the story that's based on the way we learned it, actually, since we're little kids. And we could try to sound holy and cute and deep and say some nice vortlach on it, but it's more or less the same story that we know since we're little kids, and we had coloring books, and or whatever it is that we were playing with that reminded us of Chashmonaim and Shemen, Beit HaMikdash, Yevanim. So again, הנה בדרך כלל מכירים את המעשה של חנוכה מימי הילדות. Chanukah I know from the days of my youth. ולפעמים, bless you, ולפעמים לא מתבונן בכל שנה בעומק המעשה של הנס. But you know what happens is that it doesn't make me look deeper every year into what the actual miracle was. אם קצת מתבוננים בזה, but if you actually take your time and look a little bit wider, not necessarily even deeper, but wider. Wider means on a time frame. If you look at the picture of Chanukah on a calendar, but you kind of like rewind a lot more than just the story of Chanukah, מגלים לפתע עד כמה היה כל המלחמה והישועה לא בדרך הטבע ממש. Then you understand the miraculous, beyond nature, the supernatural origins of what Chanukah is all about. זאת אומרת, when we think of Chanukah, how much time do we think about? And a time frame, we say, like, so how long was the story of Chanukah? I mean, come on, don't try to sound deep. You see, I try to just say what it, like, the way you say it in Davening as well. V'kavu shmonat yemei Chanukah. If you want to extend it a little bit, you'll say a few months. V'tulo, and not more than that. That's the way we were born. That's the way we were raised. And you're not doing anything wrong because Chazal instituted that Lashon also in the Alanisim. V'kavu shmonat yemei Chanukah elu lehodot u'lalel shimcha hagadol. That Chazal instituted 8 days. However, if you zoom out, Rav Kluger says you're going to see something much bigger than those 8 days. Very important. ובנוסף על זאת, בדרך כלל מספרים את המעשה של חנוכה בסוף המעשה. Third paragraph, right? Usually when we talk about Chanukah, all we're talking about is the end. When we speak about it's the result. דהיינו, שמספרים בעיקר את החלק של החשמונאים שיצאו להילחם במסירות נפש, ואין מתבוננים כל כך באריכות הגלות ובגודל ההסתרה וההעלמה שהיה לפני כן. So we focused very much so on the Gvura of the Chashmonaim. And maybe he doesn't say this, but we could add, we're focusing on the supernatural miracle of the lasting of oil. But that's all regarding the end of the story. So like when we think of Chanukah, 2 things. And then the Chazal's debate on what you're saying Hallel over, it's very famous Gemaras. And in the Halacha, we go back and forth trying to figure out, well, what is the Ikar of Chanukah? Is it the war of the Chashmonaim, or is it the Nes of the Pach HaShemen? And in the Mefarshim, they're going back and forth trying to figure that out. So it's not our fault that we're so glued to the end of the story of Chanukah. That's how Chazal kind of gave it to us. But Rav Kluger is saying, but a Yid has to mamash stretch their vision. Stretch their vision. Look out, zoom out, and understand that coming up to Chanukah, not the days before Chanukah, and not a few weeks before Chanukah, and not a few months before Chanukah, there was what he calls over here, Godel ha'alama v'hastara. There was ha'alama. What does that mean? Lashon of ne'elam. That's ne'elam. Hidden, and hastara, and concealment. There was such a hiddenness and concealment preceding, before the story of Chanukah, that we don't really understand it. Like, look at us. Look at us in our lives. We're experiencing 2 months of, on the one hand, Gvura me'en kamoha, but we can't ignore the fact that Simchas Torah was the greatest day of ha'alama and hastara that our generation has ever tasted. And that was just 1 day of it. And look what it did to our system. Rav Kluger is going to show us, you don't realize what was going on for so long, much more than 1 day, much more than 8 days, much more than 1 week, much more than 1 month of living in a state of concealment. What does that mean? What does that mean that we were living in a state of such a grave concealment and hiddenness? In the 4th paragraph, והקורא מעט בספרי קורות ישראל בימים ההם, That means if you learn a little bit or you read a little bit of the Jewish history books. Now, why am I not saying Tanakh when I say Jewish history books? Because it's not in it. It's not in it. However, we do have plenty of documentation in regards to the state of Am Yisrael at that tkufa. What period of time is Chanukah? Be'erech? Well, first of all, let's just get a little bit clearer. I'm not testing anybody. I'm just trying to make it clear to us. We're not in the first Beit HaMikdash, right? We're in the second Beit HaMikdash. And which prophets do we have any prophets that are around anymore? It's the end. It's the end of Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, the last prophets. So Am Yisrael is experiencing a completely new way of relating to closeness to God. We have to keep that in mind. That is what's happening the years, bless you, the years before the story of Chanukah. It's a new way that we never had to live like that before. It was a completely different thing. When the prophets were there, it's not that everyone was a tzaddik, but there was some kind of a stream a flow of consciousness, a flow of non-concealment, which is called hitgalut, revelation, that was taking place. This is what was going on in the Am at that tkufa. So he says, "V'akoreh me'at besifrei korot Yisrael b'yamim hahem," that if you're learning the context of the story of Chanukah and what happened before, you could stand there, omed mishtomem al gvurat Matityahu ubanav. You'll really be like mamish astonished by the gvura of Matityahu and his children. It doesn't just mean you'll be astonished about their heroism, but the fact that they even went out to war in the first place will freak you out. It'll in a good way. Shemalchut Yavan samu lematara leshanot Torat Yisrael mibifnim. The Greeks, what was their purpose? What was their target? Their target wasn't to kill you. The target was to uproot you from inside, from the tzura of what a Jew looked like until your time. Leshanot Torat Yisrael mi bifnim. Going inside and changing what it means to be a Jew. That was the Greek target. Bivchinat meharsaich umachrivaich mimech yetzeu. That basically, we say this quite often when we speak about sinat chinam, that we are our greatest destroyers. They were trying to cause that to be the mitziyut within the Am. That from within us, we would be self-destructive. They didn't come to us and start killing us. They caused, and we're going to see this in a fascinating way like today, they caused us to become self-destructive from the inside. And it's not necessarily the concept of sinat chinam, or that we started doing averot, which caused this almost complete self-annihilation and self-destruction. It was something else. The third line in the fourth paragraph. ואכן היה מצב נורא בעם ישראל. The situation was dire. אשר לא הייתה צרה נורא כזו מהיותם עם. We never experienced till that time such a tzara, just like we today in 2023 have never experienced such a tzara as an am like we're experiencing today. שהיו חלקים גדולים בעם ישראל הלכו בתרבות יוון. This is important. What does it mean? What's a Hellenist? What does a Hellenist look like? Think about it right now, like physically. What does when we talk about hitiavnim and other, what does a Hellenist look like? What do they look like? What do you think?
Very selfish, like they're about themselves.
That's a midah. I'm talking about physicality.
Like everybody else. Their body and they're working in it, like it's all.
Were they wearing a kippah?
Armor,
No?
Armor.
Were the women covering, they wearing tichels? Kivyachol, so to speak? What do you, no? They dropped it? They became not from? So this is the question. When we say Hellenism, we always go to thinking, oh, we just became like, completely consumed with Greek culture and we stopped looking like Jews. This is where it's tricky. That's not exactly the story. We were both. We looked like a different type of Jew, but we still looked Jewish. You understand the difference? Like usually the way we are as kids, mityavnim means those that completely gave up the identity of being Jewish and took upon themselves whatever it meant to look like Greek.
What a wrong mentality, though? Okay.
It's both. You see, this is what's so confusing about this klipa called the Yavan, that it's mamash the most dangerous one. So I'll tell you something crazy. A therapist, a psychologist, no, what was it? Was it a doctor? No, someone that was high in the field of 12-step. I have a lot of chevra. These are the heroes, the other type of heroes of today. One of the person that's leading, the 12-step program for many years told me that the most dangerous drug, he said, for most addicts is, what do you think?
Food.
No, mind-altering ones. No, you're talking about a midah. I'm talking about actual drugs right now. I'm talking about drugs. I'm talking about substances.
Why?
LSD? No. Huh? No. No, this is great. I'm having a conversation about drugs. Huh? Marijuana. Why?
Because it's called the gateway drug.
Because on a certain level, it's nishta, this can sound insane, it's nishta here, nishta there, meaning, like you were saying about gateway, meaning it's not, you could still be both. When you're tripping on acid, you're not in this world. You're not here. You're not here. Valium, you're not in this world. You're michutz, you're out. Hellenism had the ability to make you still feel somewhat okay about the level of Judaism that you were connected to, while you were completely, really being immersed mibifnim with a different thing, a different pulse. But you still kind of looked Jewish. You understand? That klipa, Rav Kluger is going to explain to us, is the thickest layer of a klipa. Klipa means a shell. In our context, it means a divider, but it also means like a concealment. Because the things that are clearly take me out of this world, I don't have to work so hard on defining that's something that's wrong. The things that I'm both, so I don't really know what to do with it. And maybe it'll eventually drag me to a really, really, dark place, uprooting me from inside. Uprooting me from mamash, mi bifnim. Yavan is that klipa, and we're going to discuss this. We're in the middle of the fourth paragraph. After the words, Shayu chalakim gdolim ba'am Yisrael halchu betarbut Yavan. Ule'at le'at nishtana kol tzura shel am Yisrael. Slowly, the whole shape of am Yisrael started changing. The tzura. Like, not just what we looked like, but bichlal, what we were composed of. We started changing. V'yudgash bezot, shelo medubar ata ba'averot v'chataim. We're not saying that Tarbut Yavan caused people to start doing Averas. We were doing Averas before, and we were doing Averas afterwards. That's not what Yavan brought onto us, right? Shebe'od bayit rishon nichraf ba'avon gimel averot chamurot. We already know, we had already the first Beis HaMikdash. We know already how we lost it, right? And we also know about the second Beis HaMikdash. Tarbut Yavan eno medubar ba'averot v'chataim. Klipat Yavan garma leshinui be'etzem hatzura shel Am Yisrael. It caused a change in what a Jew looked like, thought like, acted like, and more of whatever you could fill into that category of words. It's not necessarily they started doing averas, they started bowing down to idols, they started being like bad things, ben adam lechavero, horrible stuff with all types of immorality. That wasn't it. In fact, on the contrary, Greek culture spoke in the name of a higher moral ethic, like the schools of Harvard and MIT and Penn.
Depends on the context.
Sorry, depends on the context, but the context was usually very ethically, right? Good Purim, everybody. It was ethically like a higher standards. So you actually felt like, you know what? Maybe there were even a veirot of ben adam l'chavero for sure that you stopped doing. Could be, with the klipa of Yavan. Why? That's not how proper Greek gentlemen conduct themselves, right? It could be we even stopped doing certain Ben Adam L'Chaver stuff and felt much better about ourselves and even felt righteous and holy in the name of Greece, in the name of that which is really working on the opposite, which is exactly what we're seeing in the world of academia right now, and much more than the world of academia. Klipat Yavan garma leshinui be'etzem hatzura shel Am Yisrael. Now he's going to explain this a little bit Kabbalistically. We're just going to touch upon this for a second, but don't go too far. כמו שכתוב בספרים הקדושים, קליפת יוון היא קליפה דקה מאוד שקרובה אל הקדושה. The klipa of Yavan, again, klipa means shell here. How do you say, what word do you use?
Shell.
Husk. Klipa daka shekrova el kedusha. It's this klipa that's very, very close to kedusha. Again, a klipa that's completely tameh is far from kedusha. Like if a klipa that just says the whole world is hefker, the whole world is anarchic, the whole thing is mishigas, I don't have to struggle too much with like figuring out eventually that's not for me. Like I go through a rebellion and then I realize that's mishiga. Klipa Yavan is coming and making you feel this really may be okay. This actually sounds right. It makes a lot more sense than everything that anyone else told me. Makes me feel better about life, these decisions, this culture I'm taking on, this demeanor that I'm now appearing through. כמו שכתוב בזוהר הקדוש, ונוגה לו סביב, דא איהו קליפת יוון. This klipa of Yavan is referred to in the Zohar Kadosh as klipat noga. Okay, now, anyone that's learned Tanya is very much familiar with this terminology. I'm going to say it in a nutshell. In the Tanya, the world of the Tanya, and the world of Yiddishkeit, but the Tanya is the one that draws down from the Arizal and the Zohar Kadosh, explaining to us about the concept called that there's shalosh klipot tmeot legamre. There are 3 shells, husks. Husks? Yeah, it's a good one. There are 3 layers of concealment, put it like that, that cover up kedusha, that are completely tameh legamre. Gimel klipot tmeot legamre. Those are not the stuff that I have to work hard in this world. I have to come to learning and understanding this is wrong, v'gamarno. Klipat noga, and it's so funny when because it's such a beautiful name. You know, Noga is the one of the stars, right? It's a very planet. It's a very common Israeli name, but you'll never find a Lubavitcher girl named Noga, ever. I had a lot of Nogas in my class growing up in Ranana. Noga was like I guess a very big name in 1979, 1980. It's not a name you're going to find in Kfar Chabad. You don't call a girl Noga. Because Noga in this context is the klipa that is me'urbav ben tov vera. Like it's like our story in this world, to do beirur on klipat Noga, to clarify the things that I have to, that may seem really, really good. It's actually very connected to what we're learning with Rav Kluger on Thursdays, Bichlal, about doing a birur, doing a clarification on the things that I'm not so sure I should be involved with in this world. Maybe yes, maybe no. Removing myself from the picture, looking at it from the outside, and then making a conscious decision whether to continue or not to continue on it. That's more or less the klipa of Noga. So Rav Kluger says the klipa of Yavan is, based on the Zohar, the klipa of Yavan is the klipa that's closest to the Kedusha. It actually is almost touching the Kedusha, but when it's not almost touching the Kedusha, it sucks you completely into the world of the Shalosh Klipos Tveyos Legamre. And that's why it's so confusing. That's why life is so confusing. Because of the world of, I'm not so sure. The stuff I feel bad about, or not so bad about, and I do them, and I always say, okay, whatever. When I'm older, I'll stop doing it. Those are the things you know are not klipas noga, because those are the things that you know it's wrong, and you somehow gave yourself a heter to still do it. For whatever the reason is, right? I'll start the diet next week, right? Whatever that means, right? I'll stop doing that next week. Or tomorrow. Klipas Noga is this place where it's so close to the Kedusha that it's so confusing. So look what he says like this. She'eno medubar begimel klipot me'ot. Klipat noga hu iruv tov vara. The klipa of noga, that is the klipa of Yavan, is this mixture of good and bad. Now look what he does here. The gematria of the word Yavan is 66. Noga is gematria 64. So what's between these two things of Yavan and Noga? Gematria of the Heichal, the word Heichal, which is also the gematria of the Shem Aleph Daled Nun Yud, is 65. So he says in a gewaldige thing here based on the Arizal. You have the word Yavan, you have the word Noga, right? And in between these two words, 66, 64, and 65 here is the Uveheichalo, Kulo Omer Kavod, the Heichal, the chamber of the heart, where the Torah is, where the name of Hashem that we refer to as Master is right there in the middle. This is on a number level. Dahainu, Shaya Mamash al Gvul HaKedusha. It sounded so right. The culture that was being offered, the mind games that were being offered to Yidden, for we'll see how long in a second, really sounded right. Umimela haya kashe lipared me'apri laklipa. So it was so hard to remove the shell from the fruit, the klipa, the outer layer from the actual fruit. V'zeu omek hanoga ben shaya saviv hakdusha. This is how deep the noga was, that it surrounds, it's almost touching kedusha, but it's so dangerous, because those are the things that eventually are the ones that can be the most self-destructive. When you look at other movements that have been born out of Judaism as movements, and in the beginning maybe it started in the name of Judaism, it's not things that sounded so out there and such a chiddush. It's dafka the things that sounded, no, this really sounds like we could learn this out from here. We could learn this out. And that's how things began. Like what? You know what? Don't say it. It's just going to say bad things about Yidden. I don't want to say it. But you could leave it to your imagination. V'chen, v'chach, le'at le'ach hafach tarbut Yavan. So slowly, Tarbut Yavan is flipping everything over. Halach v'kam dor chadash legamre. And then a new generation starts to be born into a world that says, this is probably what the new Jew looks like. This is what it's like. This is what Judaism is today. V'choshech ze yafan. When it says v'choshech al pnei tehom, the darkness is covering the face of the universe, Chazal say that choshech that's always referred to as Yavan. That's Greece. That's darkness. Bo nosfu od mityavnim lemeshech 180 shana. The story of Chanukah is a 180-year-old story. The Greek culture began to penetrate into the pulse of Am Yisrael for 180 years. 180 years of displaying a new type of a Jew. It wasn't a week. It wasn't a month. It was 180 years. Now, I don't know lifespan back then.
Probably 4 or 5 generations.
But it's probably about 4, yeah. I don't know exactly how long. I don't know we have the ages of Matityahu and the Maccabim. I don't know what it is, but I would give it or take about 4 generations of people being born into a world and saying, okay, you maybe they had brisses in the beginning at least, right? And then like, okay, this is a Jew and this is also a Jew. And again, it's not we keep Shabbos and then we also go to the movies. We're not talking about Averot. We're not talking about Averot. We're talking about a deeper understanding of what the inner shape and form of a Jew is. We're talking about the ekronot of emunah. We're talking about this is before the Rambam, obviously, but we're saying it's a Jew that would probably have looked at the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam, if they had that available to them, and they would cry and laugh over the pathetic state of a Jew that buys into this stuff. But they would probably still go to shul on Shabbos, right? It's crazy to think like this, but it was mamash and irbuv. It was such a mixture of good and bad. Now, maybe for the first generation that was talking, it was like more of a struggle. But then you're born into it, and that's all you know. That's all you know. And that's what you're giving to the next generation. And this was happening for 180 years. So by the time the story of Chanukah is happening, it's like, think about it.
What was the time? Like, is it in the modern era at all?
The second Beit HaMikdash.
The second Beit.
Yeah, what were you going to say?
I said it actually feels like it's been happening for 2,000 years.
Which part of it?
This.
To this level? I was going to
like
say...
an Irbuvia
of Tovera. I was going to say, I was just focusing on the number 75, but yeah. But yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah.
I'm thinking it looks like, the concept of rationality, something that's tangible, logic, science, right? That's the change in the mindset.
It's much more that, yeah.
But then, like, Gemara learning and all the other learning they did, wasn't there, like, logic and rationality and whatnot in that, if that is the difference?
Well, Bavel, right. So we're in a different generation first. Like the Gemara is after this whole story, right? Way after.
Okay.
We go to the Gemara.
Not so much.
The Gemara starts to be formed about 60, huh?
It was just starting.
Yeah, but Bavli's not here. Bavli is like, I don't know exactly, maybe 70 to 100 years after this.
So this is the first introduction of rational science, like...
Right. It's not only that. That was part of it. That was probably like the enticement, 100%. 100%. Yeah. It wasn't just sciences. It wasn't just philosophy.
Logic, it's all of that. Everything that you can see, that you can prove, like the Greeks, they love the form, the body, like... So I'm just trying to understand...
Right,
like,
but Greek culture was more than that, because eventually what ended up happening is that we have some very twisted edut from what was taking place in the world of Greek culture. It wasn't just thoughts.
Yeah,
It was...
This is the beginning where they lost their the beginning.
It began like that, and the trajectory was mamash like that direction.
Right.
In leading us to a complete self-destruction from inside, based on our what we thought was like, no, this makes sense. This is coming to our conclusions. But the craziest thing is that where were we living? Like, what did we have while this was happening? The Beis Hamikdash. But we still, like, listen, give me today. I mean, I want the whole thing, but give me a tour of the second Beis Hamikdash, I'll take it. You know what I mean? We still had a Beis Hamikdash. We were still in a reality that there was a center, there was a Beit Hamikdash. Nachon, it wasn't like the first one, and the Chevra giving you a tour and showing you the Kohanim is not Chevra that you could trust and everything, but there was still a Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't a world void of, there was a world with a Beit HaMikdash. It's crazy to think like this. Because we're saying to ourselves, wow, for 180 years, there's such an infiltration of such a tumah into the minds and souls of Yidden. Like, what did I wonder what Yerushalayim looked like. Well, you would see a Beit HaMikdash if you went to Yerushalayim, which made the mind game even crazier. Listen, in our modern times, we could really relate to this. I'll tell you why. You could say to someone, before 1948, like you say to someone in Majdanek or in Birkenau and, God knows what, and say to them, after this, there's going to be millions of Jews moving to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding the whole place, right? So what would be their description of what Eretz Yisrael and the Jew would look like? Looking at it from there. Like a Mashiach and nothing less. And then you'd share with them like a little bit of the Klipas Yavam that's still here in Eretz Yisrael. They wouldn't be able to relate to it, just like we can't relate to, if you have a Beis HaMikdash, how could this 180 years of this craziness happen? That's how dangerous Klipas Yavan is, do you understand? That's Choshech. That's how dangerous the Choshech is. But this is all leading us to a very good place, which is the optimism that I personally, if I don't hold on to this right now, I'm going to lose my mind today. So I have to, literally, don't worry, not literally, but you know what I'm like, it feels like we're reaching a place where we need something concrete to hold on to feel like you know? El ha'or, el ha'or. So he's going to take us there. I want to continue because we just have a few more minutes. I'm sorry. So this is 180 years, נכון? ואז, בתוקף חשכת הגלות, when it got to the deepest depths of darkness, כשכבר הלכו כמה דורות בעם ישראל והורגלו במכת החושך של תרבות יוון, after a few generations are now being born into the state of darkness of Yavan, דווקא then, קמו מתתיהו ובניו להילחם. Where in the world did they get this from? Do you understand where they're appearing? From where they're appearing? Matityahu and they're not appearing. They were not born. They were not alive when pre-Yavan Tarbut. They weren't there. They never tasted what it was like to definitely they weren't alive in the first Beis HaMikdash, so they didn't see the Shechina the way it was in the first Beis HaMikdash. And I don't know how much they even knew Chagai Zechariah Malachi, because I don't know the exact years, or any of the prophets that were still around in the second Beis HaMikdash. I don't know. I also could assume that if they're alive as warriors, they're probably a little bit younger than older people at this stage in life. Older meaning 100-year-old people. They're probably younger, like in their 50s. I just said that to make everyone feel good right now. They're younger in the, right? And these are the people that are getting up. Me'efo hakoach hazeh. Where in the world did people that have nothing to really, how do you explain, how do you rationalize the gevura of Matityahu and the Maccabim? Me'efo hazeh, especially when you look at the context of the picture. So לכן אומרים בכל הניסים, בעל הניסים, so that's a typo, לכן אומרים בעל הניסים ועל המלחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שזכו כמה יהודים לקום ולהילחם. That certain Jews merited to get up and start fighting. ויובן עוד, to understand how ludicrous the situation was, look what he says. ויובן עוד במשל מעולם הגשמי. We're going to learn now more from, let's understand this more parable from like a down-to-earth to show you how extreme it was what they did. Look at this. שהנה רואים היום בחוש כל כמה שנים שינויים בעצם צורת הבריאה. Reality like we know it is different. It changes every few generations. Not nature per se, but things that have become natural to us. Right? לאט לאט משתרשים דברים. I love that word. Mishtarshim. You know what that word means? Things get rooted. ונהפכים להיות ממש חלק מהחיים הפשוטים והטבעיים. And they become to us normal, natural necessities of life. But it's only, to us, it's natural and a necessity. Previous generations, it wasn't. למשל, אם ירצה מישהו היום לחיות בלי אלקטרי ומים, right? Someone chooses today to live without water and electricity, hello, למשוגע יחשב. They'll be considered משוגנה. פחות מלפני 100 שנים לא היה כזה מושג. But listen, how old is the world? It's thousands of years. It's just the last 100 years that now everyone has electricity and running water. 100 years ago, more than 100 years, לא היה כזה מושג. It wasn't a thing. וכן, אם מישהו ירצה לחיות ללא טלפון בביתו. He's not even speaking about a cell phone. He's saying, imagine someone comes to the crazy idea that they're not going to have a phone in their home. Does anyone use, Who has phones in their home? You know what happened? Our phone has been broken. Our home phone has been broken for probably 5 or 6 years. I wanted to fix it because if one of the younger kids that doesn't have a phone would be home, they'd be able to call us. I brought a basic technician a few times, and they fixed it 3 times, and nothing. Last night, or 2 nights ago, we're sitting in the house, and suddenly the weirdest sound. It was the first time the house phone rang in about 5 or 6 years. And everyone's like, what's that? Right? And I'm thinking, that was life, that was, what do you mean? And it's even one of these phones that has a cable. It's not a portable phone. So it's not cord. It's a cord on it. It's like, and you have to stand close to it to be able to talk. And the kids were like, what is this, right? And I'm thinking, this was this was normal. Well, what happens if you weren't home? Well, there was this other box that had a tape in it, and they would have an answering machine. Then you came home, and you pressed a play button to hoping you didn't delete it, and right. So every few years, Tzurav the Bria changes. Nachon. So he's saying if a person decided today to not have that, right? וכן אם מישהו ירצה לחיות לא טלפון בביתו, יהיה משונה עד מאוד בעיני הבריות. If imagine you know someone and like, okay, what's your number? It's like, yeah, it's not my thing. What do you mean it's not your thing? I don't want to be a slave to something that's not part of my existence in this world, which is much more real and authentic and emes than any justification for using a phone. But to us, to that person would seem like they're insane, right? Sheolech mamash keneged tzurat habriya. That type of a person is going against the shape of the bria of today, of the way the world functions. Okay.
My phone would be a good example also to keep us know that.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. It's such a good example that it just shows how, if it's such a good example, you have to look at both sides of it for real. You have to understand, this is what was going on in the time of Yavan. 180 years that everyone, my father, my grandfather, I didn't sit on his lap on Seder night, and he wasn't telling me Sipurei Yetziat Mitzrayim. My Zaidi was telling me, what do you think he would tell you on Passover night? Because you would. There would be a minhag. You sit at a table. Maybe you eat a matzah. But what would be the pride that a grandfather would tell his grandson at that time of the 180 years? Wow, once we were slaves to this whole crazy idea of cherut and everything. But look, wow, and now we raised you into a world that we can really be mavdil ben or lechoshech. And that's how a kid was raised. The whole generation, that's how they were raised. Lefeta, out of nowhere, kamu Matityahu banav v'ichlito lilachem al zeh b'mesirus nefesh. And out of nowhere, Matityahu gets up and his children, and something, like this would be like a great thing to delve into throughout Chanukah. Me'efo ze higia? Like what really, how did they find this within them to go and fight for this? What was really the trigger? What was mamash the cause to bring about such gevura, right? It's different than our times. What's the trigger and the cause of the gevura of the chayalim of today? The worst and deepest humiliation our people have ever suffered. That's where it's very different. You can't compare these stories. It's a different thing. Being a gibor is the same, but the cause of gevura is very, very, very different. What brought about Matityahu's gvura? Me'efo ze ba? V'advarim, Rav Kluger says, v'advarim chozrim v'na'asim b'yamim hahem b'zman hazeh. But you know what? This is it's still in the air. Klipat Yavan, it's still in the air, and the need to become a gibor is still in the air. בזמן שבני ישראל מדליקים נרות חנוכה, כל יהודי ויהודי מקבל את koach. That's not kol. It's not a lamed. Chet. I'm sorry. I typed this in the car on the way to an event last night. So I'm sorry about this. Kol Yehudi v'Yehudi mekabel et koach achashmonaim be'etzem nafsham lihilachem al nafsham. What is it that I receive when I'm lighting the menorah tonight? What do I receive? What comes as a boomerang back to me? I have the koach to fight for regaining my Jewish posture in the world. Not just Jewish pride. That too. And that's going to be felt a lot this year. But that's just halfway. You understand? All the chevra that are now wearing Magen Davids, and now they're like identifying as Jews, is 50%. There also has to be an uprooting from within the way that, within the different schools of thought that have infiltrated into our brains that we don't even realize. The Klipas Noga is so convincing, we don't even realize how far gone we've become with certain concepts. And I receive the koach to identify what that is and to fight over it when I'm lighting the menorah in the zchut of Matityahu and his sons. This Rav Kluger is this happens when I'm lighting the candles. Well, now we can understand much better. Bayamim ahem bazman hazeh. Ve'inenu medabrim al averot. It's not that I receive koach to stop doing an avera. Again, that's not Chanukah. That's not the Inyan here. That's every day. That's every slach lanu avinu ki chatan and every shmona esrei. That's not what we're speaking about. Va'afilu lo al nosim shehorunu rabotenu chachmei ador li'nazer mehem. And we're not even speaking about things that each generation chachamim say stay away from. Sharei al pi Torah kol davar sheosrim poskei ador hofchim liot isur ma'Torah mamash. Like we say lo tasur ma'davar asher yagidu l'cha yamin u'smol. We're not even talking about takanot chazal. We're speaking about something else. When we're speaking about Greece, this is not what we're speaking about. Ela hamedubar hu al klipat chitzoniyot uklipot dakot hamenagdot lekdusha. And we're also speaking about a thick layer, which is very, very close to kedusha, but really opposes kedusha. One of the examples I could give today, I think it's very clear, especially in the world that we were all more or less raised in and born into, is that I have the koach at the Chanukah candles to look at certain people in cultures to see what kind of effect they've had on me and the way I think and feel, and realize at the end of the day, this is actually opposing kedusha. We gave an example of someone of this 2 weeks ago. You remember? Who did we mention? Eric Clapton. It's a great example. It's a great example. Because Eric Clapton has made many of us feel like a schmuck for many years, right? Like, he's just an example. He's just an example, right? But that's even an easier one because when you come out so blatantly like he has, it's not Noga anymore. He removed himself from Noga. He went up to the top 3, right? But we get the koach from the Nerot of Chanukah. It's not I'm going to go out and find all people that I hate. It's not that. That's not the avoda. It's the fight over making sure I look inside. My tzura is a tzura of a Jew. It could be also like waging war on worlds of philosophy that I enjoyed very much. It made me feel very intelligent. But at a certain point, it uprooted from me the emunah pshuta of life, and of Yiddishkeit, and of Torah and mitzvahs. I would say that's probably much a dangerous thing. Rav Kluger says, I can't tell you exactly what this means. I can't define this for you, because the klipa is so sneaky, the klipa of Yaman. Even though we're not talking about averot, we're talking about the things that are what? Pogmot be'adinut u'bezakut hanefesh hayehudi. We're speaking about things that blemish the adinut. How do you say your name in the explanation? The delicate and zach, refined state of a Jewish neshama. The Jewish neshama, the Jewish soul is so fragile. It's so delicate. It's also very strong, but it's so delicate in nature. It's so pure, so refined, that the dark forces of the world find it as a very easy target because it knows it's very sensitive, so it'll wrap itself up through emotions or through philosophies that make you feel smart and come in and mamash wage war on you. And these things blemish the simple, I'm a Jew and Hashem is one and the Torah is emet and I'm holding on and it's all going to be good. That's what it fights, right? ובימי חנוכה מקבלים את כוחות החשמונאים לעמוד ולהילחם. The days of Chanukah, I get the koach of the Chashmonaim to stand up and fight. להחזיר את השראת השכינה בישראל, to restore the presence of the Shechina in Am Yisrael, ולהאיר בפרטיות כל איש וביתו. And you know what happens, which is to me the highest thing in the world? What is it? The last few words here are probably the most important ones of the lighting of the candles. ולהאיר בפרטיות כל איש וביתו. The Jewish homes look like Jewish homes again. The home, the fabric of home smells Jewish again. It doesn't mean it looks like you're going to dress up like your great-grandmother did and you're going to eat what your great-grandmother... No, we're talking about. Those are outside things. But the general thing, that bright light that shines in every Yiddish home begins to shine again. And that, with the amount of devices that are right now in every Jewish home, it makes it that much more difficult. I'll tell you, I was planning on... What was it? I was planning an emergency meeting on Monday after Simchas Torah. I was planning this in the beginning of Chol HaMoed, to have an emergency meeting in the Kehillah regarding, let's figure out a way to just all of us call out the destruction that's happening to our children through devices that we gave them because that's the Chukei Abriya. But let's discuss it and let's figure out something together and make a community-wide decision how we're going to approach this if we all get the same exact type of phone that can keep our kids in contact with us, and that's it, and nothing else, or something like this. Because if we're going to be real and learn a Torah like this and not call this out, then we're kidding ourselves. But something happened on Simchas Torah and that meeting didn't happen. But I'm just it's crazy. I'm remembering this now. It's a thought I had about 70 days ago. This is a real thing. These words, Ula'ir bepratiyut kol ish ubeito, that the home looks like a Jewish home again. That it feels like a Jewish home. It has the smell. It has the fragrance of a Jewish home again. V'zeh ma shekatuv ba'ari HaKadosh b'chavanot ner Chanukah. And this is a beautiful text. The Ari says like this, when you have the kavanah of ner Chanukah, so I don't know what the nusach is in your home, and by us we say like the nusach of the Ari. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvah v'tzivanu lahadlik ner Chanukah. Nar lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Don't worry, it's not. You don't have to change. I'm just saying this is how we do it in our house. Lahadlik ner Chanukah rashi tevot nachal. Nitza, you guys probably say it like this, right? Yeah, that's nusach Ari. Rashi tevot nachal is also nafshenu chikta laHashem. That's what the tefillah of the candles is. My soul is waiting, is longing to reconnect to you again, to go beyond all these things that have taken over my mind. Sheyamim ha'elu me'orerim etzem aratzon va'ishtokekut laHashem. These days arouse a passion and a drive to simply be close to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, Be'emet, if any of us are able to do this on any level, in a time like today, tavo elechem habracha. You should be blessed infinitely, because it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult to even allow ourselves to learn the Torah like this. Like, before I came in today, I said, Hashem, I don't want to feel guilty. You understand? Like, I don't want to feel guilty even learning a beautiful Torah like this. Because I feel like anything that's not full-on frontal, wiping out this evil. But I have to remember, this Choshech of Yavan is also part of the whole story. In fact, a chunk of the mess that we're in is a clear result of Choshech of Yavan that went into the minds and brains of decision makers in this country. So it's a full front war. It's a full-on war. And this is part of it as well. So I have to do my job to make sure that the next door, our children won't accept that the reality we've accepted living in this country is a reality at all. Ever. That my children should ever be scared to walk the streets of Eretz Yisrael. Ever. Is basically as insane, as so far out, like the time of Hellenism. Right? But Abba, there are rabbis that also accept, that this is just the mitziyut here in Eretz Yisrael. And you know what? Hellenists were rabbis. You have to understand, they were rabbanim that walked around, looking like rabbanim that thought and acted like Hellenists. It was such an irbuv. There's stories in the Gemara on this. It wasn't just
yeshiva centers in Europe were in Greece. The biggest.
Yeah,
biggest
this is how crazy it can get. And it's, when we're laying the candles, it's saying Hashem Yisbarach, this crazy poison consciousness that Yavan has put into the reality of living here, please let me identify it, because my children will never forgive me if I don't. Ever. If I give over to them the first 75 years of acceptance of what it means to be a Jew in Eretz Yisrael, it's just as bad as giving over those 180 years, what would have been to the next generation at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. I know it sounds harsh, but it's quite simple. It's not complicated. We should, and this koach, to stand tall, firm and clear, we receive the moment we're lighting Lahadlik Ner Chanukah. This is what happens to us when we light the candles. We should be zoche for this, and we should be zoche for also, like we say, we're going to say in Al Anisim, ready from tonight in Maariv, Ula'amcha asita tshu'a gdola ufurkan kayom hazeh. We shouldn't settle on anything less than massive, huge nisim, huge miracles, and the zchut of everything holy that's happening right now in Am Yisrael.